Hi, everyone. Happy Tuesday. You know, AMD is making some moves and some noises, really ambitious. There's trouble in Windows 11 and Windows City and indoor solar panels. How do they work when the sun goes down? You're watching Techstrong Gang. Hi, everyone. It's Alan Shimel for Techstrong. Happy Tuesday. We've got a nice show for you lined up today. As I mentioned in the opening, we're going to be talking about AMD's ambitious agenda to take on NVIDIA in AI. There's troubles in Windows cities with Windows 11, and a special report from Bonnie Schneider on indoor solar panels. No, it's not an oxymoron. But before we get started, let me introduce you to our gang today. We have three, well, including me, three. We have two other gang members besides me. First of all, joining us, I think from back home in the Cleveland area, he's the founder of Tech Field Day and many other things, Gestalt IT, our own Stephen Foskett. Hey, Stephen, how are you?
It's good to be here. Cleveland, by the way, will be facing some team called the Yankees, which seem kind of a hapless team coming up here soon. So we'll see what happens.
Those damn Yankees. But yes, I'm looking forward to it. Though it should be a heck of a series, actually. Cleveland's had a great season. The Yankees have had a good season.
Yep.
We've got the Mets against the Dodgers and the Yankees against the Guardians. Though that still doesn't roll off my tongue, Stephen. How do you feel? Indians, Guardians.
I'm a big fan of the Guardians. I liked Indians because of the origins, Sokolexis and all that good stuff. But I like the Guardians too because it's named after this very cool architectural thing in Cleveland that I've always admired. So I'm cool with it.
Cool. All right. Hey, one vote for the Guardians. All right. Joining Stephen and I to my left is our IT sustainability, green, weather, climate change analyst, editor extraordinaire, Bonnie Schneider. Hey, Bonnie, how are you?
I'm well, thanks. Great to be here, Alan. Thank you.
Great to have you on. All right. And that's it for today. So let's jump into things. So at a recent Goldman Sachs conference, AMD CEO laid out an ambitious agenda and an AMD event laid out an ambitious agenda to take on NVIDIA, maybe even more ambitious than, dare I say, Intel or some of the other chip makers that we've seen. Is this for public consumption and analysts, or do they really think they could, give Jensen and team a run for their money? Stephen, what do you think?
I think that in the world of corporate announcements, this is close to a slam dunk as you can get. Essentially, AMD went from zero just a couple of years ago in the AI market to, as was reported at these events. Let's see, I don't want to misquote her, $4.5 billion. And, I think it's very safe to say that in a market that is $200, $300, $400 billion, that there's room for AMD to double, triple, quadruple that. I mean, it just, we're talking about big numbers, but we're talking about big numbers that AMD has shockingly not played much of a part in, on the one hand. And then on the other hand, they've got really great products on offer. The MI300X has been a very solid GPU for use with AI training. The new 325X, which is basically an updated 300X, looks like a pretty good alternative as well. And they're already previewing a 350X with a next generation architecture next year that should be much stronger than anything NVIDIA has. So on a hardware standpoint as well, AMD's got the goods. They've also done a nice job courting partners, which is the key to this market, essentially getting some of those hyperscalers to deploy their GPUs and deploy training models on them. But the final piece of the puzzle is something that AMD is still working on, and that is mindshare among developers. Everybody still uses CUDA. Everybody still loves CUDA. And so far, at least, ROCm, which is AMD's alternative, has not seen much traction. But of course, that could change. AMD has recently made some acquisitions. They bought Silo AI, which is a great AI platform. And that really could help accelerate it. So in answer to your question, no, this is not just something that a CEO says in front of a bunch of analysts. I think you can take this to the bank.
So, look, I'm not going to trivialize $4 billion. $4 billion is a heck of a lot of money. But as you say, in a market that's $200 to $400 billion, it's 1%, 2%. My question is, even if they double or triple that, is that enough for them to be taken as a player in this market, right? And part of it is, look, if you've got NVIDIA with 95% market share and AMD has 2%, and the rest of the gang has the other 2% or 3%, they're probably second or third in the market, but at 2 or 3% compared to one guy having 95%, that's not being a player in my mind. So, for these kinds of things, I always go back to the PC days, right? When Microsoft had 95% of the PC market. And, it was when Apple hit about 20% of the laptop desktop market. It was more laptops, right? It was when we switched away from desktops to laptops. But when Apple hit 20% of that market or thereabouts, clearly they were the number two and a big player. And we didn't use the M word around Microsoft's Windows for laptops because there was a real competitor. Do we need AMD to hit 20% of this market for that to come in? And if so, you're probably talking $40 billion, something in that range, $50 billion. That's a big lift from 4.
Yeah, and it's a bigger lift, I should note, than Lisa Su is suggesting. I mean, she's not saying that they're going to quite get to that kind of number in the GPU, training market even now. And so, absolutely, I'm completely on board with your analysis there, Alan, that, we're talking very small numbers. And that's why I feel so confident in saying that AMD is going to hit this. They've got a compelling product. It's got a good price point. It does the thing. They've got good partners. Why not? Why not get 4%? Why not get 6%? Sure, no problem. But 40% or 20% or even 10%, that's going to be a lot harder because CUDA has such an embedded market. But I think that there's an interesting thing happening here as well. And I suggest that the AI chip market is going to radically change and grow in the next couple of years because we're going to see more and more AI applications deployed in more and more places. And we're going to shift from these AI supercomputers that are using these high-end MI300X and Blackwell GPUs to do training. And we're going to see deployment of AI chips everywhere. And from that perspective, I think AMD and actually Intel and Qualcomm and many others are in a very good position to take on NVIDIA because NVIDIA is really focused on this high-end market. And who can blame them? I mean, they're selling these things like hotcakes. But soon, when we need low-powered NPUs and we need to put these things in edge devices and we need to put these things all over the place, it's going to be a market for PC CPU makers. And that's where Apple is well-positioned. It's where Qualcomm is well-positioned. Intel has a very solid laptop and desktop CPU lineup right now. I mean, they're even looking better than AMD right now in those markets with their latest parts. And of course, AMD is right there. So that's why one thing that I'm going to be keeping an eye on is the rumors that NVIDIA may get into that PC CPU market. And that would be a game changer.
Well, I think NVIDIA may be eyeing that market, but I don't, they're not going to come in there with 95% market share, right? Because you've got some very established players, as you've said, who are working that market. And Stephen, I think you're dead on, right? I think what we consider the GPU market is going to drastically change when GPU and AI chips are more than just, these big hyperscaler core kind of CPUs. The other thing I'll tell you is, AMD knows a little bit a little something about how to attack a market where you have an 800-pound gorilla, right? It's taken them a long time, but they've steadily chipped away at the apple there with Intel over the years, right? And they've had ups and downs, right? But over time, their processors probably rival, or if not downright better, than Intel's, personal computer chip. So, I think I agree, AMD is well positioned. I just think this isn't a 12 or 24 month kind of situation. This is a longer term kind of deal, and AMD is going to be in it for the long term. And you know how Wall Street hates long-term strategy. They live quarter to quarter.
Well, I was just going to say in the short term, I know that NVIDIA had mentioned there was going to be delays with Blackwell coming into 2025. So maybe there could be some window. I mean, if there is an opportunity in the short term, that there are some delays. There's also, just bringing back to something I talked about earlier on another show about sustainability. If they're able to do this more locally, as you were saying, more on devices, then that is going to make it a more sustainable, more attractive investment.
Yeah.
And that's actually a good point, Bonnie. I want to make with regard to the competition between NVIDIA and AMD in the data center GPU compute market. One of the things that you don't see in these press releases is comparison of total system power consumption and thus total system heat generation. And one of the reasons I've heard that AMD has lagged behind is because when you look at the total systems that are deployed with AMD-based GPUs versus NVIDIA-based GPUs, in many cases, the power consumption is significantly higher. Now, that has been changing with these latest generation parts, but I think that's another factor that kept AMD behind. And it's a huge factor when it comes to these massive GPU supercomputers.
It really is. I was reading an article this weekend. A lot of these public utilities made promises to Meta and Google and Microsoft and the rest that if they would build data centers in Omaha or somewhere like that, they would have sufficient, they would make the utility, give them an SLA to provide sufficient power. And now they built these data centers. They're using power like mad with these, AI chips. And as a result, the utilities are like unmothballing coal-fired plants. They had mothballed, for in lieu of cleaner plants, but they can't produce enough energy to meet demand, so they have to bring these old ones back online. And that's, sitting here in Florida where we get one monster storm after the next, and global climate change is very real for most of us, maybe not the state government, but for most of us. And, the last thing we want is more coal-fired plants firing up.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of those, that comes right here in the middle America. We talked about that last week with the AEP Ohio, trying to force these hyperscalers to have long-term contracts. I don't really blame AEP from trying to force long-term contracts, but at the same time, they've stood in the way of renewable energy in the past, and I don't want to see that happen again. I think that what we need is more deployment of green energy rather than just these short-term approaches like fire up that old coal plant again. And remember, here in Ohio, we just had a huge bribery scandal about firing up a coal plant in Indiana using Ohio taxpayer money. So the speaker of the leader of the Senate or Speaker of the House, I think Speaker of the House is in prison for it, which is just
really.
Oh yeah,
wow,
great story.
This is scandal season, I think.
A scandal related to coal-powered plants.
Yeah.
That must have been in one of the banned books down here because we've heard nothing about it.
Yeah, that's true.
Anyway, all right, let's take a break here. But, good luck to AMD and it'll bear watching. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about the trouble with tribbles. No, the trouble with Windows 11. I was doing a little Star Trek there. You're watching Techstrong Gang.
In a world where every line of code powers the future, every keystroke can introduce new threats. As software evolves, so must security. It's time to rethink how we protect our digital world. Join the leaders in DevSecOps and AI at the OpenText DevSecOps Virtual Summit on September 24th. Discover how innovation is transforming software delivery. Faster, more secure, and smarter. From AI-driven security to the truth behind cloud security, get the insights that will keep you ahead of the curve. Don't just watch the future unfold. Be part of it. Register now and secure your place in tomorrow's world.
All right, we're back here in Techstrong Gang, and our next story for today is the trouble with Windows 11, specifically upgrading to Windows 11. You know, for as long as I've been a Windows user, in full disclosure, I haven't used Windows as my primary computing device for probably close to 10 years, but I always have a Surface or a Windows device handy because sometimes you need one. And that's just how I roll. I like to have a lot of computers. But that being said, I'm an early adopter. I can't wait for the next version to come out, and I'll take it in beta. I'll play with it. But, you know, mainstream people don't generally take to upgrading Windows. It's a major step. In years past, in a history, it's been fraught with landmines. Which is why a lot of people, you know, we still have Windows XP around. But that being said, Windows 11 is starting to, it seems it's starting to gain a little bit more traction, but more needs to be done, as the article over in Techstrong ITSM says. Stephen, your take?
Yeah, it's an interesting situation, isn't it? Because the Windows 11 is still only, you know, according to the article here, only 23% of Windows installations. And this is an operating system that came out in 2021, so 3 years ago. Windows 10, which is by far the dominant operating system among Windows machines, that came out in 2015. I don't know. I mean, remember that?
10 years old? No, I do. I think that's the last Windows I was actually using.
Absolutely. I mean, I had that on a Dell laptop back then, and you know, I mean, that it's been a long time. But I know that, you know, when Windows 11 came out, there was some criticism, there was some pushback. People were worried about hardware requirements. I think people are trying to get longer lifespan out of their PC hardware. But that being said, you know, you look at the hardware requirements of Windows 11, it's really not that onerous. I mean, I think a lot of us have, you know, machines now with modern processors and 8 gigs of RAM and things like that. But many people don't. And those people are the ones that are lagging behind. There's also been a lot of pushback from corporate and educational users who haven't wanted to switch because, of course, if you're especially one of those fleet users of Windows, you need to switch everybody at the same time or else you're going to have a support nightmare. And so many of those have held back and stuck on Windows 10 just because that way they can get a little bit more use out of their older machines that, you know, and some of those machines, remember, were purchased in 2021, 2022 with Windows 10. So it's very likely that there's a lot of pushback on that. But that being said, you know, the support for Windows 10 is finally coming to an end here. The last update version is finally going to run out of support. People are going to need to upgrade. And that's going to cause a lot of grumbling and a lot of moaning, but it's time.
It is. I mean, you're talking 10 years since Windows 10 was released. I think there's a couple things at play here. And I'm going back, and anytime I go back too far, I'm always a little shaky. But if I'm not mistaken, they did change some of the licensing, fleet licensing with 11. And so I think that was, people resisted that. Number two, I think it was with 11, they made the decision, rather than coming out with a new version of Windows every 2 or 3 years, they were going to just, do the upgrade thing, Windows 11.1, 11.14, 11.5, and so you weren't going to see a Windows 12. I think by design, Windows 12 was way out in the future, right? They were going to just make it more like your apps on your phone, your OS on the phone, right? But just to give you a little contrast, right? You look at Apple, iOS comes out with a new version of iOS basically every year. On your Mac OS, though they're still called, Mac OS, we get one. I think it's about every year around
Every
there,
year.
right? I don't know. I mean, but and is Microsoft by design just always running one version behind, right? Just in time to close Windows 10 support. When is there plans for Windows 12?
Yeah, I don't know about that, but I will say that I agree with you that one of the challenges has been just this whole monumentalness. I mean, think about it. If the upgrade came out, basically this is Windows for 6 years, 7 years, and then there's a massive upgrade. It's going to be hard for people to make that jump. I think Apple was wise, as you point out, to switch to an annual release cycle of the OS. Now, I don't recommend people to jump on the latest Mac OS, just like I wouldn't recommend them jump on the latest Windows. But once there's a 0.1, 0.2 of Mac OS, most people are switching. And the same with iOS. I think a lot of people are stuck with iOS, but I mean, you look at the Apple numbers, it's the exact opposite here. So whereas, on the Windows side, it's like 80-20 still using the old operating system. On the Mac side, it's more like 80-20 using the new operating system. And that's, I think the only thing that's holding that back is that Apple won't run the newest operating system on some of their older, outdated hardware. And there again, I think Apple's in a different situation because they make the hardware, so they can make sure that there aren't any cut rate, corner cutting systems out there at the last minute that won't run the operating system from 2 or 3 years ago. Well, they could, but it seems like sometimes they release products that are obsolete real quickly. But setting that aside, on the PC space, I mean, one of the reasons that I switched to the Mac wasn't because of the operating system, it was because of the hardware. I was so tired of constantly dealing with just garbage PCs that were at bottom of the barrel, lowest possible specs, cheap, slow, low RAM, low CPU, everything. And with Apple, basically there's no bad machine because there just is no bad machine. And I think that that's another thing that holds back these upgrades because basically people with, who's bought a cheap machine on, Black Friday or something, they can't run Windows 11 on it, or they're worried that it won't run fast. And that's a good one too. So yeah, I think there's a lot of resistance here for that. And frankly, one more point of resistance is I've talked to some of my friends who are in the Windows space and real Windows devotees. A lot of them just don't like Windows 11, especially now with the latest update that's got freaking ads in the start menu.
I was just going to say that.
I mean, I don't blame you for not liking that.
Yeah, no, I
have Windows 11, and that is exactly why I don't like it. The ads, it's very distracting and it's annoying, and they already have enough of our money.
right, you shouldn't be making ads. Well, but that goes back to the licensing. They were trying to diversify revenue sources to kind of cover the cost. Because, I mean, let's face it, Windows used to be the razor, and Office was the razor blades. Right, for Microsoft, right? So if they had you on the razor, they were just selling razor blades, and that's a good business. As Gillette. But now, people use Google. You can get Office on any platform, and so if you ask Windows to stand on its own financially, they got to make their money somewhere. The other thing I'll mention though is when we talk about Windows. Yeah, we tend to think of it as the PC. But, there's the server version, there's embedded Windows, there's headless Windows, there's kiosks that run Windows underneath it. As we saw with the recent CrowdStrike and blue screen of death, you'd be surprised where those Windows boxes show up at airports and stuff like that.
And how outdated those machines are, too. That's
yes,
the thing that always shocks those of us in the IT security space is those things are just so incredibly outdated. They're not updated. They're not patched. I mean, you wonder where these DDoSes are coming from. It's coming from the sign in the airport, probably.
Yeah. Now, I'll tell you something else, though. I was talking to someone last week. I was at the Qualys security show out in San Diego. Do you know that there's a good chunk of ATMs that still run XP?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And if you've been to Black Hat and listened to some of those talks, those things are very exploitable. Gas pumps.
That's yeah.
I was at Black Hat when Barnaby Jones made it rain money. The ATM was spitting money out.
That's what I was thinking of. Yes.
Yeah. That was, geez, that's got to be 15 years. I mean, Barnaby Jones, rest his soul, passed away, but that's got to be 15 or more years ago, Steve. That was a long time ago, and it's It's still the same OS, still running on many ATMs
A
today.
lot of those ATMs are still running even after that black hat. And you'd think, banks and cash, you'd think that would be something that people would want to update and make secure.
It's just going to take a big mistake, a big glitch, something, and that might be the impetus of it.
But that being said, I think that Microsoft really does have to get people on a more steady cadence of upgrading and a more. I like the idea of just having Windows, just Windows, no number. It upgrades when it upgrades, and try to get people on that cadence, because it's not good. It's not good for any of us to have so many people running outdated OS.
Having co-founded a few software companies, I've got to tell you what a major PIA it is, just having your support team to support multiple versions like that. That was one of the big things when we first started Still Secure. Mitchell was one of my co-founders, and my friend Raj Bhargava. We were selling a security appliance. Now, between us chickens, there was nothing special about the appliance. It was a straight-on Intel. I think Dell, we were OEMing from Dell, so they were just, regular Windows boxes. But we were able to control what the hard disk controller was, what network card was on it, what the IRQ, shows you how long ago this was, what the IRQs and conflicts and all of that was stuff, right? And we then made the switch because people were like, why should I spend all that money on an appliance from you when it's just a PC? I can get PCs cheap. Okay, get the PC, we'll sell you the software. And our support cost and burden went through the roof. Because now, and that's the difference between the Apple world and the Windows world. You're supporting every little chip or card made in Taiwan, and there's millions of them. And some are standardized, some aren't. And it was damn near impossible to support all of the variations out there, where we just had to have lists and lists of network controllers that we couldn't support, or, different kinds of hard drives that we wouldn't support. It's an impossible thing. Now multiply that by multiple versions of the OS. You don't need that headache. Who wants that headache?
Absolutely. And I pity the support people too, who are going to have to push this update now that that Microsoft's support of Windows 10 is, because, I think that's the best place to leave it. Many of these users do not want to update, whether they're industrial, IoT, whether they're servers, whether they're, regular human beings out there doing regular human jobs. The last thing they want is a big update and a bunch of stuff breaking and a new OS to get used to. Man, that's not going to be fun, and it hasn't been fun for the last few years.
No, it won't be. All right, let's move along. We're going to take a break here on Techstrong Gang, and we're going to come back and talk about indoor solar panels. I'm not kidding. You're watching Techstrong Gang.
Discover Techstrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with Techstrong Group.
Well, we talk a lot about solar panels to power data centers and renewable energy, but what about powering things inside your home? Alan said it does seem like kind of an oxymoron. How could you do that if you don't have sunlight? Well, new technology is making this possible through utilizing indoor light sources and even natural light that comes inside your home. I took a closer look at this technology. It's not perfect. There are some challenges that it faces, but it's an interesting idea that I think will gain more traction. Let's take a look.
Hi everyone, I'm Bonnie Schneider with your Ecotech Analyst Insights. Do you ever find yourself searching for an available outlet to charge your phone? Well, soon you may not have to. That's the promise of indoor solar technology, also known as ambient photovoltaics. These innovative light-absorbing panels have the potential to make disposable batteries obsolete and reduce e-waste. The latest advancements in this field are impressive. Some indoor solar panels can now convert nearly 40% of indoor light into electricity. That's almost double the efficiency of outdoor ones. Leading companies in this space, like Ambient Photonics, are developing cells that can generate enough power to charge smartphones and small devices. Their technology can turn low-intensity light sources like LED and fluorescence into usable energy. But it's not as simple as it sounds. One of the criticisms of indoor solar power is that it can be inconsistent, as the light source may be unstable. Individual habits and the amount of natural light available can vary. Plus, the cost of production and integration remains high, making it tough for these solutions to gain widespread traction. Researchers are working to solve these problems. Some teams are experimenting with hybrid systems that combine indoor solar cells with small batteries to ensure consistent power output. Indoor solar technology has the potential to change the way we use and store energy. As innovation works to ensure cost efficiency and integration with existing infrastructure, the key lies not only in technology, but also getting people to use it. Indoor solar advocates will push for greater adoption to make these systems a viable part of everyday energy solutions.
Well, it does sound appealing, especially not having to look for outlets all over the home to charge devices. I think that's true particularly for people that live in older homes where the outlets aren't, always available. But the challenges of cost for these indoor solar panels is key, and also getting the traction of people to accept it. That's something we were just talking about with Windows, getting people to change. That's another hurdle, but I think it's an exciting idea. I know, Stephen, that you have an interest in solar, so I'm curious to see your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I feel like you guys set up a solar story for me every week, and I thank you for it. So let's dive into this one. So yeah, I love solar. I love the prospects of solar. But as you point out in your video, these are not your father's solar panels. We're not talking about taking that big, 4x8 sheet off the roof and sticking it in your living room. What we're talking about here is specialized panels for specialized low-powered devices. And I think that's the thing that needs to be focused on first off. So as you can imagine, as you said in the video, and as is widely, you can probably understand this, the light indoors is, number one, not as strong as the light outside, but also it's different from the light outside. Obviously, these lights above me are not pumping out ultraviolet radiation on my skin 24/7 because that would be pretty bad.
Yeah.
And the same with infrared. Why would they have a bunch of infrared coming down? That doesn't make a lot of sense. So a lot of the indoor lighting, especially LED lighting, is carefully tuned to the visible spectrum, and especially a cool white light that doesn't have a lot of the spectrum outside of that, and that causes problems for conventional solar panels. You look at what these panels are pulling in, they're pretty impressive, but a lot of them, the mainstream technology is, pulling in light, not even visible light, and converting it into electricity. So indoors, there's other technologies. There's some exciting ones. We're talking about printing solar panels. We're talking about a technology called gallium indium phosphide that has much, much better efficiency, essentially building solar cells just specifically to work under the kind of lighting that we have indoors. And
Exactly.
it is pretty cool. Let me tell you, I have some devices already that are using solar panels, both inside and outside, to provide power, point power. And they work very well. For purpose, they're not high powered. It's not going to power the whole house or something like that. But if you've got IoT devices, thermostats, maybe even some lighting, as weird as that sounds, having light powered lighting. But things like that could absolutely work indoors.
Well, we've had them on those cheap calculators forever, right? But
Absolutely. In fact, I found an old calculator in my basement yesterday from that I picked up at Macworld 25 years ago, and it looks like a floppy disk, and you slide it over, and there's a solar panel, and it works.
Yeah, and it works. It works on indoor lighting. So the technology has sort of been there. I'm sure they're improving it. Look, it doesn't kill animals, cause cancer, or any of the things, why not? I think the other thing to remember is that, so down here in Florida, for instance, I get spammed almost every day from, hey, install solar panels on your house and you get all these great tax benefits and all of this. And it's the usual nonsense. And that's great if you're a homeowner and you're allowed to put solar panels on your roof. And they've actually passed a law down here that the HOA is not allowed to stop you from doing that as long as it's not an eyesore. But what an eyesore is, I guess, debatable. But, beyond homeowners in that kind of situation, how else can we harness the power of the sun? Well, it's not the sun. That's the interesting thing. How else can we harness solar panels, even though it may not be natural sunlight, to help keep our costs down, to help be more green, to help be more sustainable? And this is a great thing.
And to reduce the use of of disposable batteries and
Right.
the chemicals in batteries. I mean, most of these devices are probably going to have batteries as well, or at least capacitors to help, level out the fluctuations. But I think many of them are going to have batteries. But there again, if we can reduce the amount of disposable batteries, it's so frustrating, isn't it? To buy that big pack of batteries.
When I have to throw them out.
And then chuck them. I hate that.
Yeah.
Why doesn't this stuff have a solar panel?
Well, that's the part of the technology that if it is unstable with indoor light, but maybe there's hybrid solutions. And I'm curious to talk about the adaptability. We were talking about how we're tech enthusiasts. We might try something where someone else might think this is a crazy idea. But do you think that people would be more apt to even just try indoor solar panels to power their devices? I personally think people in cities might be, even though having lived just recently in New York City, I had good light, but it's very difficult because you're surrounded by buildings. But I'm just thinking that it could be something where someone, as you were saying, Alan, if you don't have a home and you're in an apartment, but you want to do something that's green and you want to try to get that solar energy, maybe there is an angle for urban dwellers to adapt it.
Well, and you want to get off the AA, AAA, hamster wheel.
Yep.
Right. I can't tell you, I go to Costco and I buy them by packs like this and then chip away at the stone 2 and 3 at a time. And it's
frustrating.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's so wasteful. It really is. I mean, the rechargeable ones are probably a little better, but of course they have their own set of problems. I'm not going to get into it.
I think that what's going to happen is I think the thing that'll drive adoption of this is basically just having these things on the market. Can you imagine? Yeah. I mean, just think about it this way. What if Apple introduced the next Magic keyboard and Magic trackpad and they didn't have a cord that plugged in?
The USB, that would be great.
That would be great.
It's applications like that I think would lead people to adopt these things. By the way, there already are solar-powered keyboards available on the market, solar-powered wireless keyboards. So if you want one, you can get one. They don't work great. It would be great if we had the technology. But, think about it. What if the next Nest thermostat didn't require that wire, the power wire coming up from
the red
furnace?
Wire.
What if, the next, remote control for your TV just had a little solar cell and you set it down and it just sort of charged itself? I think that's ultimately what's going to make these things widespread, is just when they just become ubiquitous. And then, people will adopt them without even knowing that they're adopting them.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to need a indoor solar generator kind of to power your whole house. But for these discrete uses like that, where it makes sense, I think it could replace a sizable amount of the batteries.
Yeah, just remote controls. If they were to take that pull the battery
started, maybe they could put a little Find Me in it too, so when I lose the remote. Anyway, great story on this, Bonnie, and we'll be watching as that continues to move along. I think that's going to wrap up our show for today. We've got a full-on Techstrong TV lineup for you immediately following this. Stephen, I'm going to see you in Austin this week. Very excited.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited to be able to come out there and spend a little time with you and the Techstrong team.
Yeah, we'll be working.
Working
Well,
in-
it's not going to be the Techstrong team. It's me.
Well,
Futurum.
yeah, the Futurum team.
folks.
There you go. And
Yeah,
also,
Futurum.
I want to shout out as well. We're going to be live with a Security Field Day this week as well. So if
what
people are-
days are
watching on-
those?
Yeah, watching on Techstrong TV, it's going to be Wednesday and Thursday. We've got DigiCert, Dell, Sonic Wall, and Citrix presenting, and that's going to be live streaming on Techstrong TV, and of course on the tremendous, one of your best sites, Security Boulevard.
Absolutely. I love Security Boulevard. I actually love the people at DigiCert too. They really smart people at DigiCert. Speak to them often. Yeah, so that'll be tomorrow and Thursday. Check it out. It'll be on Techstrong TV, probably immediately following the gang. All right. That's going to wrap it. I hope you've enjoyed this show. Enjoy the rest of Techstrong TV, everyone. For now, though, this is Alan Shimel for Techstrong Gang, and we're out.